Lochoya sampo pagyo trashi pa tuche tempe trinle yarngoda pelge drolor tsampe zeparache palden lame shabla solvade Omo aguru vajradara sumatimu nishasane karm Uta vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Oma guru vajradara sumatimu nishas Vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Oma guru vajradara sumatimu nishas Uta vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Oma guru vajradara sumatimu nishasane karm Uta vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Oma guru vajradara sumatimu nishasane karm Uta vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Oma guru vajradara sumatimu nishasane kar Uta vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Oma guru vajradara sumatimu nishas Uta vardanya shri Varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Oma guru vajradara sumatimu nishasane kar Uta vardanya shri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Dhagi jetsun lama tuje che nyamda dala tuje sikso so agebe shesan dala tendo so oyon sunge nawa tsedo so tsechi ningne solwa debe tse dechen korlo visu leksyon yila sampe dedu malu pa geme lungi drupra chingi lo tsoni sodan dikdun shape tse dungi namke yin so leksyon Lapchen tsoni yonso zopa dan chera nye dun chamra chinge lop chancho parge ninsen tukun tu nyu pemes chancho drube gegen kunshi shi tungen de la drubra chinge lop dagi lona chola chokpa dan chumi samjur ngemba shiwa dan chodan tumbe dudun malu pa beme lungi drubra chinge Dorna tingne tsirava tamchedan techi pardune kava tamchetu Rese kyamne lama kele me tukche chingi dala siksoso Gongyab drewe nyamta dachala jitsun lame tuche rab Kudan sungi nawa drame tu nyamsunyongwe kesan tobrash Kewa kundu yanda lama dan rame cheki pela longche ching Sadan lamge yente rabzon dorje change kopa nyurtob shoya pakyuke kudan dagi lu pakyuke sundan dagi nga pakyuke tukdan dagi tön yerme çıktı chinge lu makyuke kudan dagi lu Ma kyuke sundan da gi nga Ma kyuke tukdan da gi Tön yerme çıktı çingelo Om Muni Muni Maha Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Maha Sashipeki Choshiameto Tamare Rabalingashi Nidegempadi Sange Shinto Mikte Ulowarki Drokuna Namandashi Chopar Shoye Damanguru Ratna Mandrala Kamniryatayami Sangye Chedan Soge Chanam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drupara Sho Sangye Chedan Soge Chanam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chishe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drupara Shoya Sangye Chedan Soge Chanamla Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chishe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drupara Shoya.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Buongiorno.
Good morning. Let's imagine a piece of charcoal, and we want somehow, we don't want the charcoal to be black, so we try to clean the charcoal. No matter how much water we put on it, or pass it with a sponge, are we able to take away this black nature of the charcoal? Maybe there's something chemical that could actually change the color of the charcoal, but I don't think so, that it's possible to change it. When we say that something is in its nature, it means that that thing cannot exist different from that characteristic. If it loses that characteristic, it is no longer that thing. And that's why we say, like, it's the nature of fire to be hot. It's the nature of charcoal to be the color black. So when something is of the same nature, it means that once you take away that characteristic, you take away that thing itself, that they cannot exist separately. It reminds me of a phrase from a sutra of Buddha talking about the identity of the self. It says, "Oh, my dear monk, look, there's the suitcase and there's the porter." In reality, in this case, he says something absurd to say something to get to the point. So the suitcase is the body and the aggregate of form, and the porter is the mind that takes the suitcase. But our bodies, is it something we own, or is it of the same nature of the mind? Like, for example, if I ask you, do you have a body and a mind? The answer is yes. I would have said the same. I would say the same. But where is this self that possesses the body and the mind? Because if I have this relationship of possession, it means that the possessor, can exist independently of what is possessed, what is owned. In that case, they wouldn't be of the same nature. Because if they're the same nature, then one is made up of that thing. It's different. Can we exist independently from our body and independently of our mind? Someone could say from the body, yes, because when we die, the mind continues. But even in that case, there's a very subtle body. So, from my point of view, we cannot exist independently from the body or independently from our mind. So to say that I possess my body and mind is the wrong answer, even if that spontaneously that's what we would say. We're made up of body and mind. It's part of our nature. So we can't exist separately from body and mind. But this isn't the topic of today. We could spend hours talking about this, but this isn't the subject for today. It was to show that when something is of the same nature, it means that it can't be separate from that thing. When it's not, no matter how close they are, they can be divided. It can be separate. They can be separate. In Tibetan, it's the term used when it's the same of the same nature. It means it's of the same nature but with different appearances. This is the term used in Tibetan. There are certain phenomena that if there's one, then there's the other, and if there isn't one, then there isn't the other. But they have different aspects. But we're talking about the same thing. For example, the characteristic of being impermanent is to interact. If something is impermanent, it interacts. If something interacts, it's impermanent. If something is not impermanent, then it doesn't interact. And if it doesn't interact, then it's not impermanent. But being impermanent and interacting are two different characteristics, but they are of the same nature. Even like two people who are very often together, and you always see that they're always together. In the monastery, we use this term that they're the same nature but different manifestations. Where there's one, there's the other, and if there isn't one, there isn't the other. I just wanted to start here to talk about what it means to be of the same nature. If there's one, then there's the other, and vice versa. And when it's not the same nature, what does it mean? It means that one can exist without the other. Is that clear? And if we were to ask, the color black, for example, is it part of the nature of charcoal? Without getting into great analysis, without analyzing too much, I would say yes. Let's take another example. The sky in the daylight. We have a beautiful blue sky. The clouds, are they of the nature of the sky? No. Can the sky exist without clouds? I'm not talking about the entire planet. I'm not talking about the whole planet's sky. Just this window of sky that I see. Can it be without clouds, or do there have to be clouds? No, they can exist without clouds. That means that clouds are in the sky, but they are not of the same nature of the sky, because if the clouds were of the nature of the sky, if there were sky, there would be always clouds, and vice versa. Is that clear? Now, we ourselves, our anger, hate, resentment, sadness, fear, envy, arrogance, attachment, dissatisfaction, selfishness, ignorance. Is it like the black color of the charcoal, or are they like clouds in the sky? They are like clouds in the sky. Even love and compassion, even patience, generosity, humbleness, joy, etc., etc. So, what is our nature? Because we see that these various emotional states of being are transitory. They're not of our nature. They can be with us, but we are not of our nature, which means that we can exist independently from them. We can exist independently from jealousy or anger or envy or attachment, and also patience or love and generosity and any other state. Our mind, its nature, the one it cannot be separated from, because the nature of our mind is that our mind is interdependent. Our mind is in constant interaction, and it exists on the basis of, how can I say, where the inner reality exists in dependence on a reciprocal dependence on external reality, and vice versa. Our mind is interdependent. It doesn't exist autonomously, independently from everything else that it perceives. I'll try to give you an example. I'm trying to simplify even too much. It's something that's really quite complex. I'm just trying to get to the point. This sound.
Okay.
Did you hear? We all can hear this sound, right? So we all hear the sound of the singing bowl without spending too much time on it, without analyzing spontaneously. If we were to ask ourselves, are we all listening to the same sound? The answer would be yes. But if we analyzed instead, in reality, how does this perception of the sound come about? I touch the object. There's a vibration in the air that we call sound that comes into contact with our hearing, our sense power of hearing, comes into contact with our sense consciousness, which is a part of our mind, the part of our brain, that from those signals is perceived from our brain, and then we connect that signal with a concept, with a memory, and we attribute a meaning, to which we attribute a meaning. The vibration that comes to my hearing and to all of your hearing, is it the same or is it different? It's different. The sense power that I have, my hearing ability and yours, are they the same or are they different? Not that I have, not that I have a better, ability of hearing. They're all different, no? And even our sense consciousness is different. And what about the meaning that we attribute, the memories that we have? They're all different. They're not just conceptual, they're also emotional. So if in the past, the first time I heard a singing bowl like this, if for example I was beaten every time I heard a singing bowl, even if I don't remember, because it was traumatic and I blocked it, but there's a subconscious memory that comes out to say that when we come into contact with an object, our mind connects to past experiences, past references. So if we don't analyze and we ask ourselves, are we all listening to the same sound? Yes, without analyzing. Instead, if we analyzed, we see that the experience of each one of us, that sound that we hear, is different. So we're in a subjective reality. Now, the sound that I hear, in other words, my mind that perceives the sound, and if we were the right term would be the hearing consciousness, the auditive consciousness that perceives the sound of the singing bowl. So it's my auditive consciousness, the part of my mind, my thought that perceives the sound of the singing bowl, does not exist without the sound of the singing bowl. Because if I try to remember the sound of the singing bowl, the object of perception is no longer the sound, it's the mental image of the sound, it's the memory of the sound. If I try to remember this sound, it's not the mind that's perceiving the sound, it's the mind that perceives the memory of the sound, the mental image of the sound. For there to be an auditive consciousness that perceives the sound, we need to have the sound, or rather, my mind that perceives the sound of the singing bowl doesn't exist without the sound of the singing bowl, and without the singing bowl that is played. Now, the sound that I hear, the sound that each one of you hears, does it exist independently of the mind that perceives it? The vibration in the air is one thing, but the sound is not just the vibration in the air. The sound is the union of the vibration, sense power, your hearing, and then the value of your hearing consciousness and the meaning given to it. That's what we mean by sound. So the sound that I hear and the sound that you hear is different. And it's not just about where we are positioned in the room, because what we perceive is not just the object, it's the union of the object, the sense power and sense consciousness and discernment and the value that we attribute. So it's a union of sound, the vibrations in the air, our hearing, our sense consciousness, and the value that we give to it through our discernment. When I see something, it's a union of light, sense power of my sight, which comes together with the sense consciousness of my seeing, and then the meaning I give to it. So my auditive sense consciousness that hears the sound can exist without the sound, but that sound cannot exist without that auditive sense consciousness, because if I don't have that auditive sense consciousness and I play the bell, that bell doesn't exist for me. That sound doesn't exist for me. Maybe it becomes like a sense consciousness that the body can feel, but it's no longer about hearing. What I mean to say is, when I see an object, when I see this flower, for example, my sense consciousness doesn't exist without the flower, that perceives the form of the flower. An example that's given is, we take two chairs, put one in one corner and one in another, facing each other, and we sit in a chair. And we look at the two chairs. So I'm seated in the so-called this chair, and the other chair is that chair. I get up from this chair and I sit in that chair. What has that chair become? Becomes this, and that, and this chair becomes that. So this and that, they don't exist independently from each other. They have a reciprocal dependence, big and small, a lot and a little. In the same way, the reality that we perceive around us depends on our own mind, our senses, ourselves. But our perception depends also on reality, the reality that we perceive. We are interdependent. One doesn't exist without the other. Our perception normally, what is it? It's that we are independent. I perceive what is outside of me. Our spontaneous reaction is, I hear the sound of the singing bowl and I have nothing to do with it. I hear it. I see an image. I'm seeing that image. I'm seeing that person and I have nothing to do with what I actually see. We have a perception, a wrong perception of an attitude of perception that we think we're totally passive in our perception, when instead we are the creators of the reality that we perceive. But at the same time, reality doesn't exist without our perception. Our perception doesn't exist without the reality that's perceived. In other words, the observer doesn't exist without the object of perception, and the object of perception doesn't exist without the observer. So they're of the same nature with two different appearances. This is a very complex subject, and we can spend days talking about it. But there's a reason why I wanted to start with this today. When we see something, let's take the example from Boer. We hear the sound of the bell. The mechanism is the following. I hear the sound, or rather, there's something called, there's contact, we say in Buddhist philosophy. It's an aspect of the mind. It's called contact rekpa. It's a mental factor, which has it's the union of three aspects of sense power, sense consciousness, and the object. So then the union of those, it gets me to perceive the sound. At this point, I give it a meaning. Every time there's contact and and discernment, inevitably there will be a feeling. The feeling is the aspect of our mind through which we experience reality. Our way of experiencing reality has three types. We experience reality with attraction, with repulsion, aversion, or indifference. There are three ways. Every time we experience something, a memory, an image, a sound, a taste, any object, mental or physical, when that object comes into contact with us, we have a reaction or of indifference, neutrality, or attraction or aversion. These are the sensations are considered favorable, like pleasurable, displeasurable, or neutral. When it's a good feeling, a pleasurable feeling, then naturally we feel sepa, craving, like desire. Every time we have a feeling that is pleasurable, our spontaneous reaction is to have attraction and attachment. When we have an unpleasant feeling, we spontaneously have aversion, and if it's neutral, we feel indifference. Now, From this craving comes lempas, which would be, it's translated as attachment. But in reality, it's the directing of that feeling, of the indifference or the attraction of aversion. I hear this sound, I have I have a pleasant feeling, I have attraction for it, I want it to continue. So what do I do for that sound to keep going? I think, oh, I'm going to buy a singing bowl so I can play it all the time. Or I ask, Lama, can you play the singing bowl again? I invent something so that that feeling continues. Instead, if I have a feel aversion, what do? I try to think, I try to direct the mind, what can I do to eliminate that feeling? This is this attachment, this grasping at something or something else to get close to something or to move away from something, avoid something. What happens in our ordinary way of appearing, of seeing reality? I hear the bell, it's pleasurable. Well, without philosophizing, without analyzing, was that, so it was a pleasurable feeling. I want it to come back. What do I attribute the cause of that pleasure? The playing of the singing bowl, right? And but instead we do a sound that we don't like. I always give this.
Magari a qualcuno piace, eh?
Maybe somebody likes it, but I always give this example.
Sensazione?
Our feeling, our sensation is that it's not pleasurable. I don't want it to come back. I say, stop. Don't use this example anymore. We've already understood. So what happens? I want that feeling of pleasure of the singing bowl being played come back. So I have attachment towards the bell. I don't want to hear that sound in the microphone. So what feeling do I develop towards that sound against the microphone? Aversion. And so, as a consequence, I will try to do everything I can to have more singing bowl sounds and less microphone scratching sound. If someone keeps scratching the microphone, what kind of feeling do I develop towards that person? Aversion. If someone proposes himself to play the singing bowl for me whenever I want, then I generate attachment to that person. So I feel like it depends on an external object, on a pleasant sound or an unpleasant sound in this specific case. So what do we normally do when we come into contact with a sensory object? In every moment, or even a mental object, a memory, a thought, projection, etc. We have feelings, but we live as if these feelings, these sensations, as if they were a direct result of only that object, and as a consequence, we have attraction or aversion towards the objects. And so we live in dependence of those sensory objects. I want to feel good, so I want to have more singing bowl and less microphone scratches. Now, the same object, let's take the singing bowl. If I keep playing the singing bowl,
Non mi fermo.
without stopping, that sensation of pleasure, is it the same, or gradually does it change? It changes over time, gradually. If I connect that sound with a singing bowl with something unpleasant, like when we hear the singing bowl, we associate it with something, then we, for example, maybe a little small electric shock in the cushion, and every time I play the singing bowl, there's a little shock, and we see that I'm about to play the singing bowl, then we don't want to hear that singing bowl anymore, because hearing the singing bowl would mean that we would get a shock. What I mean to say is that in our life experiences, the same object, does an object always bring the same feelings, the same sensations? No. Is it because the object changes, or because that sensation doesn't depend exclusively on the object? I mean, it doesn't depend on the object alone. I mean, there's the sense power, like getting a caress, for example. Maybe a caress could be very pleasurable, but if we have a fever, then it could be very unpleasant. And what's changed it is the sense power of our touch. So we live in an interdependence with the sense objects. We're not dependent on them. There's an interdependence on what we perceive. Our experience of pleasure or pain doesn't depend exclusively on the object, but depends on the sense power, the value that's attributed to it, the way we perceive it. Depends on the sense consciousness, etc. Also because most sensations that we have, that we feel, that we think that they're physical sensations, in reality they're mental sensations. Let me give you an example. Someone comes and tells us something we don't like. So you're a liar or something like this, anything. And then maybe they even say it kindly, but that the auditive sensation is not unpleasant. Maybe it's even pleasant. Because it's unpleasant when there's a volume or a frequency that disturbs the body, and that becomes a physical suffering. But when we hear words, "You're a liar," and then we feel bad, in reality, the object of the object of suffering, is it the sound itself or the value given to what we heard? It's the value given to the sound. So what makes us suffer in that case is not the sound, but a mental object, which is the value that we ourselves have attributed to the sound that we heard. Very often, the object of our sensations is more mental than physical, even if we think that it's physical. So now, the point I want to get to is that our emotions, our inner states of being, our feelings and senses, they are not, and they cannot be a mere result of the world around us, of our surroundings, even if it seems like that to us. And in front of this perception, what do we try to do? We try to create a world around us where everything's pleasurable and the things that make us suffer don't exist. Are we able to do this? No. Why not? Because the things that were pleasurable to us first now make us suffer, or maybe the things before that made us suffer, now we like them, because our sensations, our inner states of being, are not a result of our surrounding world. It's all interdependent. Or rather, our mind, our perceptions doesn't exist independently of what is perceived, and vice versa. So, in our inner reality and our external reality are depend on each other. They're mutually dependent on each other. Now,
La stessa situazione
The same situation
può essere vissuta in
can
modi
be
diversi, lo
lived,
stesso oggetto di
the same
percezione
object of perception can be lived in,
dalla
with,
stessa persona. Abbiamo la capacità di vivere
can
in
be
un modo diverso.
can be lived in different ways, even by the
Che
same
cosa va a
person.
determinare il
What
modo in cui io vivo
determines the
quell'oggetto?
way I live an object, experience an
Il
object?
potere
The
sensoriale,
sense power,
la coscienza
the
sensoriale e il valore
sense
attribuito.
consciousness, and the
Ok?
value attributed to it.
Adesso,
Now,
la chiave
the key
per come noi percepiamo
to
e viviamo il
understand
mondo
how we perceive and live our
non è
world
nella
is
prima
not
parte dell'oggetto
in the
sensoriale,
first part
ma
of
è
this of
nel potere sensoriale,
the sense object, but is
principalmente nella
or
coscienza e
or
principalmente
sense
ancora di più
power, but
nel
more in the
valore.
sense consciousness and even more in the
Noi
value that's
possiamo vivere
attributed
la
to it.
stessa
We
cosa
can live the
in
same
modi
thing in
diversi.
an infinite number of
E
ways.
quella è la
And
realtà che viviamo.
that's the reality that we live.
Ok? Quello è il modo in cui
This
noi
is the
percepiamo.
way we
Perché sto
perceive.
dicendo tutto questo?
Why am I saying all of this?
Nel nostro modo
In
naturale,
our
spontaneo di vivere le
spontaneous,
cose,
natural way of living
perché mi
things.
arrabbio?
I mean, why do I get angry?
Perché c'è
Because
quell'oggetto
there's that object
che mi fa
that
soffrire.
makes me
Io non
suffer.
voglio
I
soffrire,
don't want to
quindi
suffer,
devo
and so I need
allontanare
to get
quell'oggetto. Quindi ho
away
una
from that
reazione per
object. So I have a
allontanare
reaction
l'oggetto che
to
mi fa
avoid
soffrire.
the object that makes me
Nella
suffer.
rabbia
In the anger,
esiste una base,
there's a
esiste
basis,
come
there's
si
a,
dice,
how can I say,
un presupposto
there's an
perché la
assumption
rabbia possa esistere. Ed è il presupposto che la
um,
sensazione di
that that
sofferenza
that
dipenda dall'oggetto.
that
È il presupposto che io esisto
that it
indipendentemente
depends
dall'oggetto e esisto in una
that it
dipendenza. Io
depends on
dipendo,
the
lo stato
object.
interiore
So my
dipende
inner
da
state
quello
of
e io
being
devo
depends on
allontanarmi da
that
uno e
object, and so
avvicinarmi
I need to
all'altro.
get away from one or close to another.
Ci siamo fin qui?
Are we
Perciò quello che
following?
accade è
So
che
what
cosa?
happens is that
Io reagisco
so
con
I
odio,
react with
reagisco con
hate, I
rabbia perché
react with
quella cosa
anger
mi fa
because
soffrire.
that
Qual è
thing makes
se noi
me
andassimo a
suffer.
descrivere la
But if
rabbia,
we were to describe anger,
nella mia percezione la
my
rabbia che cos'è?
perception, anger is, what
È
is it?
la volontà
It's
di
this desire to
allontanare,
move away, to
eliminare,
eliminate,
distruggere,
destroy,
annihilare,
and just
comunque
annihilate.
allontanare da
Anyway,
noi
get
ciò
away
che noi
um,
percepiamo come
from
la causa
what
della nostra
we
sofferenza.
recognize as being the cause of our suffering.
Ok? Quindi in fondo
So,
perché uno si arrabbia?
why do we get
Perché non
angry?
vuole soffrire.
Because at the basis
Per
they
questo
don't
che
want to
permette che uno si
suffer.
arrabbia,
That's also
uno
why
si
I
può
think,
anche
when
esplicare
someone
perché
does,
dico
when someone
guarda
gets
quanto sono ignorante,
angry, it's like
per
taking
non
a big
soffrire
sign that
soffro
says,
di più,
look how stupid I am, look how ignorant I am. To not suffer, I suffer even more.
perché alla fine la
Because
rabbia
in
più
the
che ci
end,
farci star
you know,
meglio
in the
aumenta
anger
la sofferenza.
actually increases our suffering
Ok?
instead of making us
Però
feel
non è
better.
questo
But
l'argomento
this
dell'oggi.
isn't the topic of now.
Se la mia
If
sensazione,
my
le mie
emotions, my
fossero
sensations were
il
the
risultato
result,
diretto
a direct
delle
result
situazioni
of
in
the
cui io mi trovo,
situations that I
se io
find
fossi una
myself in,
vittima del
if I
mondo,
were a victim of the
non
world,
sarebbe
then it
possibile
wouldn't be
non
possible
arrabbiarsi più,
to not get angry and not
perché l'unico
and stop
modalità
getting
per non
angry,
sentire più
because
rabbia sarebbe quella di vivere in un mondo perfetto.
the only way to not get angry would be
Nella nostra percezione
to live in a
ordinaria,
perfect world. But
noi pensiamo che per
we
non sentire,
think
per non essere
that
più
to
arrabbiato, io cosa
not
devo fare?
to
Devo
not be angry
allontanarmi
anymore,
dagli
I need
oggetti
to
di
get
rabbia.
away from my objects of
Devo essere in
anger.
una
I need
situazione dove
to be in
nulla
a
mi dia fastidio,
situation
dove sia tutto
that
bene,
where everything's fine and
e a
nothing
questo
bothers
punto
me.
non
And
mi
at
arrabbierò più.
that point, I won't
Però
get
non
angry
funziona così.
anymore. But that doesn't work.
Quindi
So
che cosa succede?
what happens?
La nostra mente, il
Our
nostro
mind,
essere
our
è
being is
interdipendente.
interdependent.
Questo vuol dire che
This
non
means
esiste
that it
così
doesn't
come noi lo
exist
percepiamo in un modo
as we
autonomo,
perceive it as being
indipendente da tutto il resto.
independent and autonomous.
E che la realtà che noi
And the
percepiamo non
reality that
esiste
we perceive
indipendentemente dal
doesn't
modo in cui noi la percepiamo.
doesn't exist independently from the way we perceive it.
Però insieme con questo
But
c'è
together
un'altra
with
chiave.
this, there's another key.
Il modo
The
in cui noi
way we
percepiamo la
perceive
realtà, ogni
reality,
cosa,
everything,
è
is impermanent. It's 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 but it is it's we in other words we're made up of habits. As Geshe Chikawa said in the 11th century, the mind is full of defects, but what you teach it, the mind it will follow. So let's imagine our mind like the sky and the emotions like the clouds. It's not that the clouds are necessarily bad. There are all kinds of clouds. So what happens is, if we know how to move the winds, we can bring in certain clouds and eliminate others. Our mind, our being is made up of habits. So the more I act in one way, the easier it is to react in that way. The less I act in that way, the more I weaken that way of being and thinking. So when we say that our nature is pure, very often we think that by saying that our nature is pure, that we're wonderful people made of love and kindness, like pure, understood as being perfect beings. And for some strange reason, we've become what we've become. There are those who say, we're Buddhas and we just don't know it. And at this point, we'd be very ignorant Buddhas, which doesn't even is not consistent with the definition of Buddha. When we say that our nature is pure, what do we mean by purity? When I say water is pure, I'm saying the water is free from dirt, or free from what I identify as filth, as dirt. So what's pure for one is not pure for another. It depends on the value that we attribute to it. It's like when I was in India, for example, and I don't know, it came to my mind the time I loaned my refrigerator to I had one of the few refrigerators in the monastery, and every once in a while they would make these momos, these Tibetan meat raviolis, and they needed a place to store the meat, and I didn't eat meat at home, but they would the Tibetans at 5,000 meters, they're used to eating meat. Anyway, let's not open this discussion. So it's not that they would store the meat in Tupperware. No, they would just take everything out of the fridge. Thank goodness. They would fill the fridge with meat. Sometimes they would have to tie a rope around the fridge to keep it closed. And every day the lights, the electricity would go out 2 to 6 hours a day. So sometimes I would come back from class, and there was the floor. The floor wasn't flat. So I would have there would be a little stream of blood that went from the refrigerator to the stairs, and then at the end I would tell them, okay, you can have the refrigerator, but please, when you're done, please clean the refrigerator out. So the white refrigerator, when they would give it back, it would be pink, and I said, you didn't clean the fridge. They said, oh yes, we did. Yes, look, it's clean. So in that context, this concept of the concept of cleanliness, they would take, the rag that they used to wash the floor, they would use the same one for the fridge. So that I would have to clean the refrigerator, which is not a problem, but it's just an example that concept of cleanliness is much different. So when I say it's clean, or I say it's clean or it's not clean, it depends on what you mean and what you understand too of being dirty. So when we say that something is clean, that something is pure, it means that it is it lacks impurity, lacks dirt. But what do we mean by impurity? When we say that our nature is pure, it's not understood as being pure because we are free from anger and envy and arrogance, even if our nature doesn't have those feelings. This is not what we mean. Our nature is pure because we are free from we're free from an autonomous existence, an objective existence, because we are interdependent beings. So what happens is my nature is pure because I interact. The way I manifest myself is the result of the interactions that I have and the way in which I interact. I am not by nature a person with jealousy and anger and etc. Because if I interact in a certain way, I can live without those things. If I interact differently instead, then I would live with these emotions. So in my nature, I don't have jealousy, envy, and anger, in an autonomous, solid way, but I'm an ignorant, selfish way, interdependently within a context, in the context, the context in which I interact with. So, and if I interact in a way where I reinforce these emotions, they will be stronger, and vice versa. I can also weaken them depending on my interaction. So when we say our nature is pure, it doesn't mean that we are perfectly loving, harmonious beings. It means that we don't exist as we are now in an autonomous, independent way, independent from everything. We exist as we are, the way we perceive, in an interdependent way. We interact, and it's because we interact that every interaction brings a transformation. The interaction brings transformation, and without interaction, there wouldn't be change. So once I interact, I transform myself and I transform the object with which I interact. Our being is impermanent, it's interdependent, in constant interaction. Our self, we interact with objects of perceptions, with our senses, with our mind, is constantly interacting. So the question is it possible to live without anger? Is anger part of my nature, or is anger a way in which I created a dynamic, is it something that I've created based on the way I interact, or is, in other words, is it possible to diminish the anger? Yes. So is it possible then to eliminate anger completely? Yes, because it's not part of our nature. It's not something that, if I'm anger is not something of our is not part of our nature. It's like the cloud that passes in the sky. So how can I change the anger? How can I eliminate anger? I need to weaken this habit and reinforce its opposite. So I need to stop nourishing that habit and nourish an opposing habit. Our mind works very often on the basis of opposition. So to eliminate a thought, we need to generate a directly opposing thought. That's why I stop nourishing anger and I start nourishing love and gratitude, respect, humbleness, generosity, etc. So precisely because we are in constant interaction and interdependent, we can transform our being. And that's the only real reason why it's possible to become a Buddha. What is a Buddha? In just a few words. When they translated the word Buddha from Tibetan, yeah, the Tibetans were geniuses, linguistic geniuses, because aside from at that time there was a Sansen Gampo was a king of this time. He took the most erudite men at the time, and they took all the Sanskrit terms and he had them translate directly from the Sanskrit. Just imagine if we took if we took the greatest thinkers of the time and we paid them to make this translations. They did, for example, at the time, like a 2-year conference with the great thinkers of India and Tibet, where they made a huge document at the end, all the ways to translate from Sanskrit to Tibet, like ways to make new words, or even, I mean, they even got to like the details, like how to do a layout of the text, and we're talking about more than 1,000 years ago. So following this, now it's kind of lost, but even just from the layout, you could see the quality of the text. Texts that were more important, that had to do with the correct view of reality. For example, then they would leave more margins on the side to give value to the content, because it was very expensive to print out text. And one key thing that they did was to find a common way to translate text. Unfortunately, in the West, we're still just newborns compared to what they were able to do with translation from Sanskrit into Tibetan. And one word that we haven't been able to translate yet, because the word Buddha didn't exist in Tibetan, and so they asked themselves, how should we translate it, in a literal way, or should we give or meaning and the definition? So, because the word Buddha in Sanskrit, I don't know Sanskrit very well, but it refers to it would be translated as a enlightened being. Instead, the Tibetans chose to give meaning to the definition. So they created the word in Tibetan, Sangye. Sangye. Sang literally means to eliminate. Also, it's similar to enlighten in the sense to purify, eliminate. So to like taking away darkness, to eliminate. And gye, which means literally to increase, to augment. So a literal translation of Sangye from Tibetan would be eliminate, increase. Why? Because the state of Buddhahood is not a being, it's a state of being. to which some beings are given this name. The state of Buddha is where all inner conflicts, all mental defilements, and their imprints um, are eliminated, and all qualities are developed to their maximum capacity, ability. This is a state of Buddha. So when we ask ourselves, what is a Buddha? It's an inner state of being where ignorance and all the mental defilements that generate suffering has been eliminated, and everything that generates well-being, like wisdom and love and patience, etc., has been developed to its maximum point. And so eliminate and increase. Is it possible for us to become a Buddha? Yes. If yes, then why? For the simple reason that for the same reason that we can diminish our anger and love more. If it's possible to increase love and diminish hate, then it means that it's possible to diminish more and increase more and more, because our mind is interdependent. Because our state of being depends on how we interact and how we transform. And the mind of a Buddha is as interdependent as our own. The biggest difference is that an enlightened being is in a constant positive interdependence, and we're in a interdependence that's positive, positive, negative, negative, positive, positive, etc., etc. So, okay, are you following up to here? So now, it's fundamental when we talk about purification to understand that it is possible to eliminate the imprints of our actions of the past, and it's possible to eliminate our destructive emotions, these so-called mental defilements. Why? Because we are interdependent. And this doesn't depend on anyone else. This depends on how we interact. So when we begin a purification practice, at the basis to do it well is the awareness and the deep trust and faith in one's own nature. And my nature is not of negativity. Negativity is not part of my nature. The negative karma is not part of my nature. The anger, jealousy, attachment, dissatisfaction, these are not part of my nature. Likpa, as we said yesterday, this negative karmic force and mental defilements and their imprints are not part of our nature. They are with us interdependently. They are with us. But if we act in an opposing way, we can eliminate, we can change them and eliminate them, okay? Now, today, we're going to start the practice of Vajrasattva. Vajrasattva. Before this, we have seen, there's just one piece that's missing so that we can understand the practice of Vajrasattva well. We saw that to purify, we need the 4 powers. So there's the power of the basis, the foundation, which is having an opposing attitude, an attitude opposite to the one that was generated when we did our negative action. As normally, to have this basis, there are 2 levels. The first level is to generate a feeling of love and compassion, because our negative actions are done on the basis of selfishness. So our negative actions are done on this basis of this obsession of self-gratification. So to oppose that, I need to generate a sincere feeling of altruism, of love. And here, I just take advantage to remind you that altruism, from my point of view, is not the opposite, is not the direct opposite of selfishness. Because if altruism were just the opposite, then I think it would be very difficult to develop it, because we are selfish beings. We are selfish. Instead, altruism is the development of selfishness. It's because selfishness is this obsession, this attraction and aversion, this strong, strong attraction, aversion towards happiness, and attraction to happiness and aversion to suffering. It's defined as the obsession to self-gratification. It's this kind of craving where I desire happiness and I don't want to suffer. So altruism is this identical feeling of attraction to happiness and aversion to suffering, but that expands. I don't want to suffer. I want to be happy, but the way I want to be happy and the way I don't want to suffer, I want the same for you. Your happiness is as important to me as my own. Your suffering as important to me as my own. It's not that I'm concerned about you and I'm not worried about myself anymore. It's not that to be altruistic that I don't need to be selfish anymore. I need to expand my selfishness and transform it, and stop becoming a childish being, to become a mature being, which is the term that is, these are the terms that are used, selfish beings or childish beings, and to be a mature person is an altruistic one. I see that the other person's suffering is as important to me as my own. His happiness is as important to me as my own. So it's not about feeling guilty when we do something for ourselves or not taking care of ourselves, but it's about including others. This is the way to develop altruism. So most of our actions of jealousy and hate and negative karma that generates suffering come on the basis of selfishness, this obsession with I and the my. So to purify this, we need to generate love and compassion and altruism, which means giving importance to the happiness and the suffering of others, to be attracted to the happiness of others and have aversion to the suffering of others, which is not always obvious, because there's a very subtle line here that when we begin a spiritual path like the Buddhist one, at a certain point there's a danger, and I just say it like as a kind of warning. There's, we could be attracted not to the happiness of others, but we're attracted to the idea of being the one who helps and loves others, because a good Buddhist helps people and loves people, and I want to be a good person. I want to be a good Buddhist. So I nourish my own ego with this idea of needing to love everyone, but I don't really care about others. Forgive me if I say it in this way, but in this danger, we see this clearly when we can't do something, or we feel bad about not being able to do something, or we want to do something to help someone, but what I do, what I can do, the person doesn't accept. The person doesn't accept my help, or my help doesn't work. and then we're upset. So we say, well, I'm sorry, do you really want to help that person, or you want to be the person that is helping? You know, you know, maybe what you can give me is not what I need right now. I don't know if it's ever happened to you to be upset or to get angry because you want to help someone and they don't want your help. It's happened to me a couple times, for example, that when I'm upset, that I just, or when I'm not well, I close up. I don't need to connect with other people, and it hasn't happened that many times, but it's happened where people say, "Oh, well, Lama, what's going on? No, tell me what's wrong. Tell me, And then the other one is upset because I don't allow that person to help me, when what I would need is just silence. And at a certain point, I need to get out of my state, disconnect from this state to allow that person to do something. What I mean with this is that it's not always just black and white. There are often a lot of gray, shades of gray. And when we talk about altruism, we need to be careful and ask ourselves, am I attracted to your happiness, or this idea of being, the one who helps? When we see that there's an attraction to being the one who helps, it doesn't mean that there's not also the attraction for the happiness of the other. But if there's this gray zone, then we need to disconnect from that attachment to our ego and put emphasis on the attraction to the happiness of the other. Of course, it's much better to encourage and to nourish our ego by helping others than hurting them. But when we talk about purifying, there is this feeling of altruism, feeling this attraction to the happiness of others, and an aversion to the suffering of others, the way we feel for ourselves. This is one of the first foundations. It doesn't mean that we need to have realized this state of altruistic, but at least to induce this mind to be able to purify. The other foundation that exists, to purify our negative karma, which is the foundation for our negative karma, is deeper, is our ignorance. It's as if everything existed autonomously, everything as if it existed separate from me, objective, like the example we gave before of the singing bowl. So this is the basis, the foundation of selfishness. So to purify, the first power, this power of the foundation, the basis, on a first level, we should generate love and compassion. On a deeper level, we should, in addition to love and compassion, we should generate a correct view of reality, this awareness, this perception that we live in an interdependent reality, and that nothing exists in an objective, autonomous way. It's part of the basis to purify, because what holds up negative actions is mostly ignorance, grasping at reality as if it were independent, autonomous, and on top of that, on the other level, is selfishness. And then there's jealousy and anger, dissatisfaction. But those are more superficial layers. At the basis of all this is selfishness, and what holds up selfishness is the ignorance, where I live in it, I exist in an independent, autonomous, solid way. So to purify, we start with this first layer, which is generating love and compassion, and on a deeper level, we perceive interdependence. Um, we have the awareness of the correct view of reality. And that second power is the power of openly admitting our mistakes, or opposing the negative action. It's called Sungitjitop in Tibetan. It's this opposing power where we openly admit what we did, that we created a negative interdependence. So if I were to be in the same situation, I shouldn't do it. So I openly admit that I made a mistake. Let's remember, without any feeling of guilt, because never do we judge the person. We're judging the actions. And I'm not bad, but that action is violent. That action is negative, but I'm not cruel. I'm not negative. I'm not this or that or the other, But, some manifestations of myself I need to increase, and others I need to weaken and diminish. The third power is the power where we do something, we actively do something physically, verbally, or mentally to oppose that negative action that we did. We generate a strength that opposes that other force that was created with that past negative action. The fourth power is the power of taking the commitment to not repeat it again. So we generate a strong determination to not repeat that attitude, that behavior, that action. So these are the four powers which are fundamental in all of the practices of purification. Now let's look at the practice of Vajrasattva. The practice of Vajrasattva, we have it here on page 38. First of all, it comes from a sutra of Buddha, where I wrote down these verses, but then today I didn't find them. So I'll look for it and bring it after lunch. But anyway, there are the references of the verses of, it's called Dorte Gem, if I remember well. The Sutra of Buddha that makes reference to the practice of Vajrasattva as a specific practice for purification, and where it's said that the Vajrasattva practice is this mantra. This mantra of Vajrasattva has two specific functions. One is to stop the negative karma, stop the increase of that negative karma, and it also opposes that negative karma so that it eliminates it. So, and it has a strong power of purification. Remember, for that to happen, all four powers are necessary. So let's begin first by looking at the name of Vajrasattva. Vajra is a word for which there is no translation. The Tibetans made a translation, which is Dorje. We haven't made a translation yet. We haven't managed. That's why in all texts, sometimes, some of the translations really leave a lot to be desired. So Vajra or Dorje it has different meanings depending on the context. Literally, it can mean diamond. It's like diamond. In some cases, it can be used also in. It can also make reference to meteorites. It can be used but mostly it's diamond. But the meaning of Vajra and Dorje means indestructible, something that cannot be separated, fractured among. So among all the minerals, the diamond is the most resistant. So when we say the indivisible, the indestructible, we talk about diamonds. So Vajra, in this context, brings us to this meaning of something that is indivisible, indestructible, inseparable. And what is indestructible, inseparable? And also has this aspect of purity. It's the union of method and wisdom, of love and wisdom, the bliss and emptiness. In other words, is the mind in a state, in a pure state, in a state that is free of ignorance, free from selfishness, free from suffering, selfishness, free in a state where there is no more negative interdependence. It's the state, it's the union, a non-dual union of method and wisdom. Method, we mean love and compassion, and joy and bliss. And by wisdom is a view, is conceptual, but mostly non-conceptual, spontaneous and deep. It is absolutely consistent with reality. This is what we mean by Vajra. So Vajra is a non-dual state, the state of union, inseparable, simplifying it, of wisdom and love. Sattva means being. So a being, a non-dual being, a being that lives in this non-duality and this state of union of love and wisdom, that lives in perfect harmony with himself and everything. Vajrasattva is a way of saying also Buddha. Here, sorry, I said the power of the word, and here it is. Say the power actually of Alor, who brought it to me. What happens? Vajrasattva then is not a god. Sometimes we have this perception when we talk about what's translated as divinities, all these images that we see, often we have this perception as if they were gods, because inevitably we see what's transmitted to us in Buddhism with the resources we already have and what we already know. So we see them as if they're gods. Vajrasattva is not a god. Vajrasattva is a state of being. Vajrasattva is the state of enlightenment, it's the state of purity. That's why Buddha Shakyamuni is inseparable from Vajrasattva. Is inseparable from Vajrasattva because Buddha Shakyamuni is also Vajrasattva, and there are many, many beings who have this state. Yesterday, when we looked at the practice of the 35 Buddhas, Buddha Shakyamuni described that there is an infinite number of beings. There are billions of Buddhas. But in our historic period, Buddha Shakyamuni is the one who transmitted the Dharma. But there are just billions of enlightened beings, which is wonderful, which means we can get there too. Vajrasattva makes reference, first of all, to a state of being. Second, In the practice of Vajrasattva, this state of enlightenment comes. There's this personification, and something very special about Tantra, that which doesn't have form is given a form so that we can relate to it. Okay, so when we talk about for example, the non-duality of love and wisdom, of a Buddha, this is something quite abstract. And to be able to connect to it, to relate to it, a form is given so that I can relate to it. So there's the word is the embodiment, this personification, this embodiment of this state, this non-dual union of love and wisdom. This embodiment is represented as this being with a white body who keeps a Vajra and a bell in his hands. The Vajra is this symbol that represents love and compassion, bliss, joy, method, masculine energy. And this other symbol, which is the bell, represents wisdom, the correct view of reality, feminine energy. This is the union of the two. He's represented in two positions, with the Vajra at the heart and the bell at the hip, or in the hugging mudra. This is the union of wisdom and method, with the Vajra and the bell and the hugging mudra. So Vajrasattva, this is enlightened being, is represented as such. Is the embodiment of the enlightened state, the state of purity, our nature, which is free from anger, jealousy, etc. The aspect of Vajrasattva, he's adorned with 6 ornaments that represent the 6 perfections, a state where one has perfected generosity, morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, and wisdom. And the main emphasis of this embodiment is given to the non-duality of method and wisdom, love, compassion, and wisdom, the storge and bell, represented like this. Now, here, if someone can distribute these, give this out to everyone. It's an image. It's an image of Vajrasattva. It's a painting that I photographed at the monastery of Tashilhunpo in Tibet. And Vajrasattva, and around there are the 5 Dhyani Buddhas. But now let's focus on Vajrasattva. So, even if we understand that Vajrasattva is an archetype, is a representation, is a personification, embodiment, at the same time there are other beings who have reached the state of Vajrasattva. And there's another name, Vajradhara, is given in different contexts. It can be the manifestation of the same in a different context. But when we have an embodiment of Vajrasattva, this state of union, of bliss and love and compassion and wisdom, correct view of reality, this image represents 2 things. It represents both the state, the state, but also all of those who have already reached the state. So when I connect with Vajrasattva, I'm connecting myself on one side with this state that I want to reach. So it represents what I want to be. It represents me in the future, recognizing my own potential, that I can reach this state because I'm an interdependent being and my nature is pure, and which allows me to transform. And at the same time, Vajrasattva represents all the beings who have reached this state. So through Vajrasattva, I'm connecting myself to everyone who has reached this state, so has this double function. In the practice of Vajrasattva, we're going to use the power of visualization together with the recitation. I'm looking for something here. I'm having a little bit of trouble. Anyway, in the practice of Vajrasattva, we're going to unite two things, visualization and recitation. That's why we also say Dorje Sempa Gomde. Dorje Sempa. Dorje is Vajra, Sempa is being. So Vajrasattva, Dorje Sempa, is a non-dual being. Gom is to meditate and De is to recite. So it's a practice of meditation and recitation of Vajrasattva. Now, let me just see something here.
Esiste un sutra di Buddha.
There's a sutra of Buddha that is called the essence of ornaments, and one passage says,
Nyeba chungtu chamoyang, drulgi chewe rapshintu, lyunga semle nyamperches.
That's not the one I was looking for, actually. And the one I'm looking for, I didn't write down. This is another verse from this text, which is also very beautiful, that says we need to, in the same way that, because of our distractions, if we stay completely distracted, but even a small negativity, just like a small bite from a snake, can deteriorate the whole body and mind. So even a small negativity, a small negative habit, if it's not taken care of, if it's not faced, can hurt us. So things need to be, the bad habits should be faced when they're small, not when they've become big. But we should face them when they're smaller. But I was actually looking for the original, I was looking for the passage that talked about the original verse of Vajrasattva. So let's go directly to the sadhana, the practice of Vajrasattva. If we do the preliminary practices first and then recite the 35, the practice of the 35 Buddhas, even in our own language, because it's a text that encourages us to openly admit our mistakes. And in this case, with Vajrasattva, in reality, it's a very simple practice, very powerful. And let's remember that it's a meditation practice that is done in all Vajrayana Buddhist traditions. In Tibet, for example, there are many different traditions, but all of the traditions, from the first to the last, they all do the practice of Vajrasattva, and practically all the same way. They're very, very similar. There's a difference that, like in some traditions, for example, the last two syllables, the hun and the pe, they're recited or not. I mean, it's one of the very few differences that exist. In any case, let's look. It's a practice. How can I say? It's a fundamental practice that we see in all traditions. It's because there are many meditation practices that exist in one tradition and not in another. Instead, Vajrasattva is in all traditions. Into the more ancient traditions, to the newer ones, to the younger ones. Generally speaking, when we visualize a sacred being, a so-called divinity, there are three possible forms, four we can say, four different places where we can do the visualization. I say mostly three, but there is also a fourth, places where we can visualize. We can visualize in front of us. We can visualize on our crown. We can visualize in our heart. And we can visualize ourselves in the form of the divinity. Vajrasattva. When we do the practice, you can visualize this embodiment, this non-dual embodiment of love and wisdom in these three ways. When it's in front of, it's a frontal visualization, is when we're making offerings and requests, where the emphasis is given to where we're making requests of blessings. Purification practices, instead, we visualize mostly on our crown. And when we practice and where we visualize ourselves as Vajrasattva, this purpose is to generate the divine identity or the divine pride, where we recognize our own pure nature and we identify with this. For the practice of purification, we visualize Vajrasattva on our crown. So the text, the first part is the taking of refuge, to generate that basis of love and compassion. So it's the taking of refuge and the generation of bodhicitta. I go for refuge to the triple gem. The three jewels is all there too. Is kind of is this translation like this, because from Tibetan it's kunchok. It literally means jewel, but it doesn't really mean jewel. It means kun is that which is difficult to find. So kunchok is that which cannot, that which is hard to find and is extremely precious. So it's translated as a jewel or gem. So Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are excellent because they can guide us along the path towards enlightenment, out of samsara, out of suffering, and they're hard to find. They are the most excellent of the difficult things to find. So kun, chuk, sum, the three jewels, the triple gem, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I go for refuge to the triple gem. I shall liberate all sentient beings and all sentient beings, and place them in a state of enlightenment. I will free them from samsara. I will do everything possible. I take onto myself the responsibility to do everything possible to free people from, free all beings from their suffering and take them to a state of enlightenment. So here we're generating love and compassion. So there's refuge, love towards myself, and I generate bodhicitta, which is love towards others. So I take refuge I go for refuge to the triple gem. I shall liberate all sentient beings and place them in the state of enlightenment. I shall purely generate bodhicitta, this pure intention to become a Buddha, to help all beings be free from the suffering. So in this moment, we recite this 3 times, and the inner state that we're generating is, I want to get out of samsara. So I recognize all permeating suffering as suffering, that it's not enough to live, and it's not possible to live in a perfect world. I need to eliminate my ignorance and my anger and develop all the qualities of love and wisdom. And it's not enough for me to get out of suffering. I want others to get out of suffering too. And so I'll do everything I can to help every being get out of suffering. And the only thing I really can do is to reach enlightenment myself, to then help others do the same, because I can't guide someone, I can't take someone to a place I've never been. So may I become a Buddha to help every being do the same. This is the intention that we generate here, and it's that first power. The power of the basis, that foundation that we've talked about. And now we have the description of the visualization.
Honle dorje karbo tsenga ba tewala hongi tsemba tele weser chue du yonsu gyurbale dorje semba kudo karbo sheji chanyigi dorje dan tribu zimba yum dorje nyema karmo sheji chanyigi trigu dan toba zimbe kyuba niga ang targi nasa da rinpoche gen natsobe gemba yab dorje kitrungi shuba tei tuger dawe kinkorgi tentu hongi karpo tele weser chue ranre yeshepa chen rang za hong bam ho nisu mebar gyur Larian tuke honle westerche wangel hanam chendra deshin sheba tamchegi dilangomra wangkurduso she sowata tenamgi yeshegi duzi kangwe pungba tone omo sarwata agata abishengate samaya shiri ye hon she wangkur ye ku yeshegi duzi kang mikyobe ugembar gyur chumdende dorje semba dadan simchen tamchegi diktripdam tamsik nyamcha tamche changshin thakpar zedu sol she sowata tuke honle westerche Simchen tamchegi digrijan sange sechela nyebe chöpa puls. Tenamgi yönten tamche wögi nambra düne tuke honla timbe sichidan tuto pynsum tsokpar kyur. Okay.
Okay, before reading the visualization, in Tibetan there's a term that is tiktin, which is when there's a text, when there's a visualization like this, there's certain aspects that are obvious, they're written, and other parts that are not written. They're between the lines, which doesn't mean that they're not there. It just means that there's another version that's very detailed, that's much longer, and then there are abbreviated versions where the details are not all written, but doesn't mean that they're not there. In this visualization, this is an abbreviated version, and so there's some aspects that are not written down, but I will explain them to you. In other texts you can find them. So let's read the translation. And this is the description of the visualization. One could read it, or just if you have the familiarity with the visualization, you can also visualize it directly. The words are meant to direct our mind. On the crown of my head, from a syllable pam. The syllable, when we talk about syllables, imagine a point of light that vibrates with that sound. So on our crown, this dot of light here is white, that has the sound of pam. Pam is the essence of Padma, the lotus flower. Pam is pa is the first syllable of Padma, and ma, the m, the ma, is the tigle on top. It has a very deep meaning. Even there is the union of absolute and and relative, or method and wisdom here in the syllable pam. When we visualize the seed syllables, there's the part of the syllable that underneath that represents the appearance, and then the little circle above that makes the ma sound is called the drop, the tigle, that represents the lack of inherent existence. So reality appears, but it doesn't exist as it appears, as being independent, autonomous. In the visualization, we don't need to think about all this. There's just a dot of white light that resounds with the sound of pam. The pam, this dot of light that vibrates with this white light that vibrates with the sound of pam, then transforms into a lotus flower. Sometimes it's white, or it could have various colors. White is fine, or multicolored, but in this moment, let's say white. So on top of this lotus flower, which is about the size of our crown, of our head, the syllable a arises, still a dot of light, still white, that vibrates with the sound of a, which is the essence of the moon. And then it transforms into a moon cushion. Imagine a white moon cushion. It's called a white cushion called a moon cushion. And on top of that, the hum syllable arises, always still white. And on the hum represents the mind. Then a white Vajra arises. Vajra is this object, and in this case has 5 spokes in every direction, and then one central. And so from pam comes the lotus flower, and then on top of the lotus flower comes the a, and then there's the moon disk, and on top of the moon disk we have the hum, and then the hum transforms into a symbol, the symbol of the Vajra, and the Vajra represents both method but also non-duality. So remember, there are always 2 parts. If the Vajra has 2 sides. One side is the masculine energy of method, and the other side is the feminine energy of wisdom, and the central part in the middle is the non-duality of them both. So the seed syllable transforms into the symbol. So from this white Vajra, these 5 spokes, and in the center there's another hum. So the Vajra vibrates with the sound of hum. From the syllable hum, from the Vajra, light rays emanate and then collect back. And it's not literally described here. So this means that the light rays, if we add it in the text, we can add these light rays emanate, and they fulfill the 2 purposes. If we go into more details, it means that they go to all holy beings, and make offerings to the holy beings. So these light rays emanate. They go to all the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, all the holy beings. And then when they come into contact with them, they come with their offerings, and every holy being um, um, generates an inner state of bliss. And then the light rays come back and bringing with them their blessings, and then they emanate again, going to all the sentient beings. The difference between a holy and a sentient being is because the holy beings live in this positive interdependence, and the sentient beings have not reached that positive interdependence yet. But they're not different categories, not that one can never become another. It's just that one is able to live in a perfect, positive interdependence, and the other not. They go towards, these light rays go to the sentient beings, and they transform into what the beings need. So initially, they would perform the four generosities, material help. So imagine these light rays that go to every being, to food for those who are hungry, protection for those who are in danger and war, medicine for those who are sick, etc., etc., helping on a material level. And then those light rays transform into affection and love to help on an emotional plane. And then they give also protection, so that the beings can feel protected and sure, because to be able to receive the gift of the Dharma and spiritual practice, we need these conditions. We need to have materially what we need. We need to be balanced and feel sure. If we don't have those first three, then we're not ready for inner growth, a process of inner growth. So these light rays help first on these first three generosities, and then they help, they transform into the gift of the Dharma. The beings reach a state of peace, and those light rays come back and reabsorb into the Vajra. Through the power of having made offerings to holy beings and having helped sentient beings, so this positive energy, this merit, when it comes back into the Vajra transforms into the complete form of Vajrasattva. So from this, light rays emanate and collect back together, transforming into Vajrasattva with a white. So on top of our crown, there's the lotus, the moon disk, and the Vajra, and all the light rays go out, they come back, and then the Vajra is transformed into Vajrasattva, and is similar to the image like the one we handed out. So it's a white colored body, one face, two arms, holding a Vajra and a bell. So he has there are two ways actually to make this visualization. You can visualize Vajrasattva as he is described, or in union of Vajradhatu Ishvari, which in union, and she is the feminine version of Vajrasattva. You know, the state of non-duality doesn't have a sex, but we live in this reality. So we, in this specific case, you can visualize Vajrasattva in union with Vajradhatu Ishvari. This represents also the union of method and wisdom, represents this non-dual state of bliss and emptiness, represents the union of the masculine and feminine energies. So Normally, we do this visualization where Vajrasattva embraces his consort Dorje Nyema, which is Vajrasattva Ishvari. White in color, both white in color, and one face and two arms, and you can visualize as described here, where she has a cleaver and a skull cup, and the cleaver is a curved knife that represents wisdom, and the kapala, the skull cup, is like a skull, which is full of nectar, which it represents bliss. You can also visualize her with Dorje and Bell, and they have the same symbolism. Here it's the nectar here that fills the skull cup, because physically the inner substance that generates bliss is called white bodhicitta, and it's explained that in the subtle body it actually resides in the crown. So that's why the skull cup is used. So filled with nectar, it represents inner bliss. It's nothing dark or strange. It's symbolism. So you can visualize her with a cleaver and skull cup filled with nectar, or Dorje and Bell. This practice is how it's described in the practice of Yamantaka. They're both adorned with silken scarves and various jeweled ornaments. These jeweled ornaments represent their qualities. If you see there, if you see the images, you see these 6 types of jewels that represent the 6 perfections. There are necklaces and around the hair. So the father, so Vajrasattva, sits in the Vajra position. So his legs are crossed, and in his heart, on a moon disk, there is a white hum from which light rays emanate, inviting forth wisdom beings who are similar to him, and together they become non-dual. What's important here is that when we visualize Vajrasattva, whether it's a solitary Vajrasattva or in union with Vajrasattva Ishvari, they're not 2 separate things. It's always Vajrasattva. It's just a different way to represent this non-dual, this state of non-duality. It's not okay. So here's Vajrasattva and here's Vajrasattva Ishvari. No, it's just one thing, and can be represented in one way or another. But given that the state of non-duality is also the perfect harmony of the union of masculine and feminine energy, and this not just on a coarse level but on a very subtle level, this is also represented by the physical union of masculine and feminine. So when we visualize Vajrasattva in union, they're not 2 beings, it's one embodiment of this enlightened state. Is this clear? Otherwise it seems like, okay, there's Vajrasattva and his consort. No, it's one thing, one being. What happens in all sadhanas like this one? There are 3 beings. They're called. There's Tignig Sempa, Tamsik Sempa, Yeshe Sempa, and Tignig Sempa. So it's the commitment being, the wisdom being, and the concentration being. So the commitment being, the Samaya Sattva, is our own visualization. The commitment being can come in two ways, or it's the visualization, or it's like it's the representation in a statue or in a tanka. So Samaya, commitment, can also be translated as this meeting place. So it's this being of meeting. It's where we come into contact with the wisdom being. The commitment being is where we meet the wisdom being. So the wisdom being is actually Vajrasattva, not just our visualization. All the beings who have reached the state of Vajrasattva, these are the wisdom beings. Sometimes they're called Dharmakaya in some contexts. So the commitment being, our visualization, is this place. Samaya, this word is also translated as meeting place. It's where we can meet the wisdom being. So our visualization is a bridge, it's the meeting place, and it's this bridge between us and the beings who have reached the state of Vajrasattva, and it's also the meeting place between ourselves and the being that we can become. So Samaya Sattva, Savaya means commitment or meeting place. So in this moment, we've finished generating our Samaya Sattva, but it's still just a visualization. So to do the practice well, we need to really be able to trust that it's not just a visualization in front of us or on top of our head. So from the heart of Vajrasattva, these light rays go to all directions, to all the beings who have reached the state of Vajrasattva, and then all replicas come, they emanate from their hearts, and then they melt into the Vajrasattva, and we say Za Hum Bam Hum. So we say Za, all the wisdom beings come. When we say the Hum, they come, Bam, they absorb, and Ho, they become inseparable. So Za, we invite the wisdom beings. Hum, the wisdom beings enter into the commitment being of Vajrasattva. Bam, they absorb. Ho, they become inseparable. So when we do these four syllables, Za, Hum, Bam, Ho, it always has this meaning. Za is the syllable to invite. In other Vajrases, we say Samaya Za 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 Za. It represents an invitation where we're calling the wisdom beings to come to this place. So the visualization of Vajrasattva is not just the personification of the state we want to reach, and that reminds us our pure state. We're also connecting with all of the beings who have reached this state. So we invite with Za these wisdom beings, whom they come to our visualization, they actually absorb into Vajrasattva, and Ho, they become non-dual. Za, Hum, Bam, Ho, Nisu Me Pargyur, they combine and become non-dual. Something here in this translation, if we do the practice reciting the translation where it says light rays that emanate, inviting forth wisdom beings who are like himself or themselves, we say Za Hum Bam Ho, and then we say they combine and become non-dual. So in the sadhana, you can add za, hum, bam, ho, just like as written on page 38, because it's not something that can be translated. So when we make the visualization, we invite with the za, hum, bam, hom. They come, they absorb, they become non-dual. There's a gesture that you can also do here, where you do za, where we are uniting the index finger with the pinky. So the left hand is looking upwards, and the right hand is down. Za. So we're touching our ring finger, sorry, our pointer with our pinky. Za. Whom we do the opposite, and then whom we unite them both, and then ho we do the hugging mudra. Za, hum, bam, ho. This helps the visualization, helps us remember the meaning. Za, hum, bam, ho. This mudra also has a variant. So when you imagine it towards yourself, you do it like this. And then there's also a different way to do it, where it maybe when you have a frontal generation that's not on top of ours, then you do za, hum, bam. You've got the back of your hands that touch, and then you do ho. This is, I learn this, but rarely do I see it used. So to simplify, let's just do the one we did before, za, hum, bam, ho, in a normal way. But just know that there's also this other possibility for a frontal generation. So we've done now the visualization. Our commitment beings and our wisdom beings have become inseparable from our visualization, our wisdom, our commitment beings. Let's go on. Again, once again, page 41. Once again, from the syllable whom at their hearts, light rays emanate and invite forth empowering deities. It's said that these empowering deities, all Tathagatas, please confer empowerment on this person. Having thus been requested, they hold up vases filled with nectar of wisdom and confer the empowerment, saying, Om Sarva Tathagata Abhishekata Samaya Shriye Hum. Thus initiated, the Vajrasattva's body becomes filled with the nectar of wisdom and is crowned to understand it right away, or to explain it right away. I tried to find a logical explanation for this abhisheka, these initiations, empowerments.
Nella visualizzazione, che è la parte più semplice, si visualizzano che si invitano i 5 Dhyani Buddha e le 5 grandi madri. Okay? Le grandi madri portano nelle mani dei vasi di nettare.
The 5 great mothers hold these vases that are filled with nectars, and it's poured on the crown of Vajrasattva in this case, and his body is filled with nectar, and he experiences a great state of bliss through which he realizes the state of emptiness, and then the water overflows. This nectar overflows, and then comes as the form of Akshobya. This is the visualization. The empowerment or abhisheka is something that it's very similar in many spiritual traditions, where at the beginning, when one begins the path, one is given this blessing where one reaches this state of enlightenment, it's a kind of transference of power. One is initiated, and this ceremony, this symbolism, this act of empowerment is given that represents being a Buddha, represents being a completely illuminated being in every aspect. And in this case, we visualize Vajrasattva, who becomes inseparable from the wisdom beings, and the Buddhas are they confer the power to be able to act on behalf of all beings. It's a kind of recognition of his perfect state of enlightenment. I'm trying to put into words something that is really quite difficult, complex. Also because in many various texts, the explanations in Tantra, there's so much symbolism, and the meaning behind the symbolism is rarely explicitly given. It's something, it's more circular than linear. And in this case, Vajrasattva, at our crown, we invite, with the light rays, we invite the 5 Dhyani Buddhas and the 5 great mothers who uphold the vases filled with nectar, who concede the empowerment onto Vajrasattva. His body is filled with nectar, this water nectar, with the words Om Sarva Tathagata Abhisheka Samaya Shreya Hum. Om Sarva Tathagata, all Buddhas. Abhisheka is the initiation, is this empowerment. The word, I mean, in English, empowerment is in Italian, they don't have this word like empowerment. You know, like I'm giving you the means to do something. It's like one becomes a doctor, or you do all of your you do all your studies, and then you have your degree. And the moment that you are allowed to practice, then you become a doctor. There's that moment of getting a degree, but getting the degree doesn't make you a doctor. It's all the studies and the whole path that you did before. So this is the kind of graduation, let's say, of the Buddha. So, and then the Buddha Akshobya that comes from the excess water that overflows on the crown represents the Guru. And now there begins a kind of dialogue between Vajrasattva and us. Bhagavan Vajrasattva, I request you to cleanse and purify me and all sentient beings of our downfalls and obstacles, as well as our degenerated and broken words of honor. I'm asking you to purify all negativities that were generated to me and other beings, not just me, but other beings too. Help me purify all my negativities that I've generated in the past through negative emotions. Purify and all the negativities that were generated because I didn't correctly uphold my words, my commitments, or I reacted out of my mental defilements. Our obstacles are our mental defilements, and the words of honor here are the commitments, are the vows that we take. Having been thus requested, so this is where we admit our mistakes. This is when we go to Vajrasattva, and let's remember that Vajrasattva at our crown represents so many things, represents the embodiment of all wisdom beings. So we're in front of Buddha and we admit our mistakes. And at the same time, Vajrasattva represents our own power, our own potential, our own nature developed to its maximum potential is like the version of ourselves that one day we can become. So when we're referring to Vajrasattva, on one hand we're confessing, but we're also tapping into our own potential. So we ask Vajrasattva, please help me purify my negativities. Allow me to purify my negativities. I mean, I can purify my mental defilements and my negativities because my nature lacks inherent existence. I don't exist in an objective way as a jealous, angry, etc. person. So I can, may I be able to purify through this interdependence, through the interdependence of Vajrasattva. And this is where we openly admit. So here one could stop, remember some specific negativities that one has committed. Here it's done in a very generic way. One could focus on a mental defilement or another. Having been thus requested from the syllable whom at its heart, light rays emanate, cleansing all sentient beings of their downfalls and obstacles, and making offerings to please the Buddhas and their offspring, the Bodhisattvas. So I make request to Vajrasattva. I openly admit in his presence, who is on my crown, I openly admit my downfalls, my errors, my non-virtuous actions, and I ask not only for myself, but on behalf of all beings. So at this point, from the heart of Vajrasattva, light rays emanate, and they go to all beings, purifying them of their negativities. So it's not like something. These light rays manifest in a way so that they can interact. They're allowing them to purify. It's not the light rays can actually purify them. It's like saying, I'm coming and purifying your negativities. No, the only thing I can do is to interact with you to allow you to purify your own negativities. But given that my interaction, but it's like saying that through this interaction of mine, it's as if I'm purifying them. But I hope that this is clear. So the light rays emanate, cleansing all sentient beings of their downfalls and obstacles, and they also make offerings to the holy beings who have this state of bliss and joy. All their good qualities collect back together in the form of light, which dissolves into the whom at the heart. So all the beings around us reach a state of peace. Their negativities, their mental defilements, their negative karma is transformed and purified. They reach a state of peace, and the holy beings reach a state of bliss, and from them the light rays come back and they bring all their qualities of joy and bliss and wisdom and love. They come and they go back to the syllable whom at the heart of Vajrasattva. So whereby his brilliance, power, and strength become the quintessence of the sublime. Quintessence of the sublime. Which means that the light rays reabsorb, bringing all the qualities of the beings of the state of Buddhas, and all of his qualities, his brilliance, become excellent. They become the quintessence of the sublime. You say, what does that mean? It means that the qualities become excellent. It's like the qualities of Vajrasattva are showing themselves at their maximum potential. And here there's a part of the practice that is not described here in the practice, but is fundamental. At this point, there are two possible visualizations as we do the recitation of the mantra. The first visualization is where the light rays have come, they've reabsorbed into the home at Vajrasattva's heart, and at this point, from the heart of Vajrasattva, his body is filled with light and nectar that comes down from his heart. He's seated on our crown, and our central channel, it's as if it were united with his. And so the light and nectar comes down through our fontanella, and it's a nectar, it's a white, bright liquid that fills up our body through our central channel. And there are two ways of doing this visualization. And one way is where, as I just said, the light rays, they reabsorb, and then from the home at the heart of Vajrasattva, this light and nectar come through his body, through his central channel, and come into ours. Another way to visualize is if you visualize Vajrasattva in union, the light rays go out, they come back in. Vajrasattva and Dhatu Ishvari, they're in union. They are in a deep state of bliss, deep joy. It's as if like an infinite orgasm, we could say, a deep state of pleasure and a bliss that goes beyond any conceptual. When we experience a state of pleasure, regardless of what it is, eating something tasty or the pleasure of sexual intercourse, the moment of the pleasure, the conceptual part of our mind at that moment, is it stronger or weaker? The stronger the pleasure is, the weaker is the mind that is thinking of the past and the future and thinking of all sorts of problems and things. So what happens, in just in a few words, the inner state of pleasure brings the mind to a deeper state of being. The subtle winds they absorb into the central channel, and they bring the person to a deep state of consciousness. So what happens is, when this deep state of consciousness is united with love and wisdom, these positive states of we're bringing these positive states of being to a deeper level, and this is the most important thing that we can do. And in Tantra, we're often reminded of this union of bliss and emptiness, which means in an altruistic state with love and compassion, we generate an inner state of bliss that's physical, that takes the mind to a deeper state of consciousness. And in that state, we realize the lack of inherent existence of all phenomenon. I'm not going to explain this all in details, but at this point, that in the Vajrayana, this is where we constantly repeat this union of bliss and emptiness. So here we're visualizing Vajrasattva in union, the state of great bliss from the union of their body. Their body is filled with nectar, and that it comes out of their it just overflows from their crowns, flows down their bodies and into our crown. So what's the difference between these two visualizations? Once, in the first one, it comes directly from the syllable hum, and in the second visualization, they come in, they enter into union, and that flows down from their crowns down into our body. So the nature of the nectar is the nature of uncontaminated, non-dual bliss and emptiness. And what comes to us is it manifests as nectar, but it's in essence is the state of joy, bliss that perceives the ultimate nature of phenomenon. It's the union of love, compassion, joy, and wisdom. It's the state, it's the mind of a Buddha. So, the form is the nectar, but it induces this mind. So let's imagine our body just fills up with nectar. Why do we have two different ways of visualizing? Because we're different, and so one works better for one, and another works better for someone else, and we can do both of them. I mean, this part's not described, so you can do as is better for you, what's more comfortable for you. So I would start with the visualization from the hum at the heart of Vajrasattva, and then you can do the other one with them in union. In our society, the problem is that sex is a taboo, and here it's something important that sexual union here is symbolic. It's not actual, because it's something that it's what is as similar as possible. If we consider our mundane reality, the sexual union is as close as we can get to this feeling. So we visualize that our body is filled with nectar. So it comes from our crown and it just fills up. And now there are 3 possible visualizations that can be, all 3 can be done, or just one, or you can do them, alternately. So as our body fills with nectar, all of our negativities, all the negative karma that we've generated in the past, the negative karmic force that I've generated in the past, our mental defilements, etc., as the body fills up with nectar, so these negativities come out of from the lower parts of our body, and they come out in the form of filth, and a filth that is absorbed into the ground in like a kind of sweat, and also from our pores, like a kind of sweat that dissolves into space. So as our body fills up with nectar, our negativities and all our negative, our mental defilements and negative karmic force, through the power of the love and wisdom of the Buddhas, through that power, we are purified. Another visualization is our body fills with nectar, and then as our body fills up with nectar, imagine that we're like a vase. So then at this point, the dirt and all the negativities come out from the top, like a teapot, like come out of the spout instead of the ground. And then in the third is kind of a mixture of both. So in the third one is the third one is a mixture of of the two, actually, from our pores and also from the lower parts. You know, we can do one like we can do all three. The most common is the one where it comes out of our pores, but we can adapt it to, you know, to what is more comfortable for us. But we're imagining that the negativities come out like as dirt, representing our mental, you know, our mental defilements, our negativities. And as we do this, as we're doing this visualization, we're reciting the mantra Vajrasattva.
Sutokayo mebhava, supokayo mebhava, anurakto mebhava, sarva siddhi mem prayatsan, sarva karma sutsame, citam shriyam kuruhum, ha 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 ho bhagavan, sarva tatagata vajra mame munza vajra bhava, benzi bhava maha samaya sattva ahum pe. Il mantra originale
the original mantra goes up to the A, but the hum pe, it's said that the hum is added to people who have already passed away, to dedicate to them, and then the pe to eliminate interferences. That's why in some traditions they have the hum and pe or not, but in our tradition we always recite the hum pe after the a. After lunch, I'll explain the meaning of the mantra, because the translation of the mantra can be done in many different ways. The other day I was reading, you know, from experts of Sanskrit who were doing the translation. You know, there are at least 5. You know, it's not obvious to translate to translate from Sanskrit. Let's read quickly what we have here. Body, speech, and mind of all the Buddhas with a diamond nature, fulfill your commitment to take care of me. Vajrasattva, be near to me. Be my stable nature. Be pleased with my nature. Be very pleased with my nature. Be extremely pleased with my nature. Grant me all the attainments. Grant me all the siddhis. Give me mental power and the wisdoms of the 5 supreme healers. Lord, endowed transcendental destroyer, I am indestructible diamond too, so do not give up on me. I have the Vajra nature of the great commitment being, the union of great bliss and emptiness. In just a few words, there are many ways to translate this, and today after lunch I'll read some more literal translations of the mantra, but it means that, I mean, I recognize my own nature. I recognize that I too am of the nature of Vajrasattva. I recognize that my mental defilements and negative karma that I generated in the past are not part of my nature. It's as if I have the sky that's full of clouds, and I remember that those clouds are not part of the sky. So gradually, you know, we can see past the clouds and look at the pure nature of the sky. The mantra of Vajrasattva is not. It doesn't say, oh, you know, look how bad I am. No, the mantra of Vajrasattva reminds us of our pure nature. We visualize Vajrasattva as the embodiment of the state of Buddhahood, and we connect with those beings who have reached that state through this aspect of Vajrasattva, this embodiment of Vajrasattva. We remember also that we can reach that state, given that we have the same nature, that we're not beings of, you know, with mental defilements and negative, you know, mental defilements and negative karma in an intrinsic, solid way. I mean, we are able to transform our being. And so the mantra also says, I should not forget my nature. I shouldn't abandon my nature as being empty of inherent existence, as being a pure being. In other words, I remember to have faith in myself. I can do it. I also can become Vajrasattva. This is just in a few words the meaning, and we recall our nature. We recall this recognition of ourselves. We say, I too am of a pure nature, and I can reach this state. And now we say to Vajrasattva, out of ignorance and delusion, I've transgressed my words of honor and let them degenerate. Lama, Lord Master, Lord of beings, with a nature of great compassion, to you I turn for refuge.
Sileni gashi nyam lama gompo kyabso chi tsobo dorje zimbate tukje chimbo dani che drowe tsola da kyabchi.
In other words, given my ignorance, out of my own ignorance, we say, I did so many stupid things out of my own ignorance and delusion. I take refuge in you. Help me, guide me along this path so that I can become Vajrasattva too. And Vajrasattva answers us.
Rigipu, kyogi dikchi dan tamtsi nyamcha tamche changshi dago, she sone rangla timbe rangi gosonda dorje sembe kuson to yermi chebar kyur.
Vajrasattva replies, he answers as child of the family, you are cleansed and purified of all your downfalls and obstacles, as well as your degenerated and broken words of honor. Then he dissolves into me, and my body, speech, and mind become inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of Vajrasattva. Or rather, we go to Vajrasattva and we say, protect me, guide me along this path. Let's remember that it's not just Vajrasattva as the embodiment of all of the Buddhas who have reached the state of bodhisattvas, but I'm also addressing my own nature and my own pure nature and my ability to become like Vajrasattva, So Vajrasattva answers us, my daughter, my son of the family, you who are on the path towards enlightenment, you are cleansed and purified and here we imagine that all of our negativities have been cleansed, our so-called karmic debts, our mental defilements, they're completely purified. It's not that we're absolved. This concept of being absolved is that I did something and I should be punished. Here, what we imagine is that through this power of purification and this practice, our negativities are eliminated. We have generated an opposing force, and our mental defilements have been pacified and our negativities cleansed. Then Vajrasattva, at our crown, he becomes as small as a thumb, smaller and smaller, comes into our central channel, which opens, comes down joyously and sits at our heart, where there is our very subtle body, speech, and mind, and our very subtle body, speech, and mind become inseparable from his body, speech, and mind. We become of the same inseparable nature of Vajrasattva. And here a whole practice of meditation opens up, where one develops the divine pride, the divine identity. One sees himself as the divinity, the state of love and love, compassion, and wisdom. But this practice finishes here. And here we could do another part of the practice where we do the self-generation of Vajrasattva. But here ends the practice of purification of Vajrasattva, where we have become the same nature of Vajrasattva. So this is a very quick explanation of the practice of Vajrasattva. It's said to recite the mantra at least 3 times, or 7 times, or 21 times, or or 108 times, 1,000 times, etc. It's this original tantra from Buddha. It said that with this attitude, with these four powers, if you do this mantra 21 times, it has the power to stop it keeps the negative karma from growing, has this power, and that's why it's done at least 21 times. But it's not about counting. It's about the emphasis of the time given. It's not just enough to do it 21 times, and thinking about who knows what. It's important to generate these four powers. So, and when we do this final part, we take the commitment to not repeat those actions again. My negativities have been purified, and I take the commitment to not repeat them. And in this way, in the practice of Vajrasattva, there are the four powers. There's the power of the basis at the beginning, the power of openly admitting our mistakes when we go to Vajrasattva, the power of the specific practice of purification when we do the visualization of the nectars that go into our body and purify us and revitalize our qualities of love and wisdom and purify our negativities. And then after, this last power, which is to promise to not repeat such negative actions. We take the commitment to not repeat them. So this is the practice of purification of Vajrasattva, and in this way, this explanation is both a transmission and a commentary of the practice. What we'll do after lunch is to do the practice together and to give you the explanation, a little bit more detailed explanation of the mantra, and then we will briefly see towards the end of today. We'll do the Vajradaka fire puja. We're actually going to go outside and do the Vajradaka fire puja. I'll give you the transmission, and you can do it at home too. You can do it anytime. My master in Tibet, Kachin Losang Rinpoche, he used to do this every day. He would do the Vajradaka fire puja every day at home. I mean, you take a small container with just a little bit, you take a little bit of fire and some black sesame seeds. I mean, Geshe Losang Punsak, he does it every day at home too. So this is another practice of purification. So we're going to end here today. So we've seen the practice of Vajrasattva not in a very detailed way, but enough. We were able to see the meaning of the practice, the meaning of the name of Vajrasattva itself. And I just repeat one more time that we try to connect when we visualize Vajrasattva. And the image of Vajrasattva. This is the embodiment. This is the materialization of all beings who have reached that state, as like a bridge, a connection that connects us with these enlightened beings. Is also the embodiment of our own qualities. Completely. Are completely developed, like a kind of mirror. Let's do our dedications now.
Lame kutse rapten chi nam karatin le chokchur ge padang losan tempe dreme sasum ki drove munsel taktu ne gyur chi kewa kuntu yanda lamadang drame cheki pela longche ching Sadan lamge yunte rabzone dorje change kopan yurtobesho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan dele kshin Ninsen takto delek pe kuncho sumke chinge lop kuncho sumke ngodrubo tsol kuncho sumke trashi.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Balame Sangye Rinpoche, Kyobalame Tamcho Rinpoche, Drimbalame Gendo Rim, Kyamne Kuncho Sumla Chepa, Locho Sambo Pagyo Treshipa, Tuche Tempe Trinle Yar, Pegye Drolo Zambe, Zebra Chen, Pande Lame, Shela Chepa.
Have a good lunch. And thank you. See you at 3:30.